Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Lamed Aleph, and with this daf we complete the second perek. Itmar, Chasi Zayit Chutz Lizmano, Chasi Zayit Chutz Limkomo, V'Chasi Zayit Chutz Lizmano. Amar Rava, V'Yikatz Keyashen Hapigul, V'Rav Hamnuna Amar Aruv Machashavot Haveh. We have a very interesting case where someone is doing shechita, and he has in mind, while doing shechita, that he's going to eat half a kezait outside of the right time. Now, if he would stop there, there's no pigul, because only half a kezait. Then he says, I'm also going to eat another half a kezait outside of the place. If he would stop at this point, this is a case that's mentioned in the Mishnah, it would become pasul, but not pigul, because we do join together this chatzi zayit and this chatzi zayit, but since we don't have a full zayit chutz lizmano, so it's not going to be isur karet, not pigul, but because we do have a full kezayit altogether that is pasul in some way, then therefore the korban is pasul. That's if you stop there. That's an easy case in the Mishnah. But here's where it gets interesting. Then he says, I'm going to eat another half a zayit outside of the time. Now, we have this third item. And the question is, will it join together with the first chasi zayit? If you put them together, then you have a half a zayit that are both chutz lizmano. That's a full kazayit chutz lizmano, which would make it pigul. So that's a machloket. Amar Rava says, he quoting pasuk in Tehillim, that the pasuk is talking about Hashem awake as one's asleep. Hashem will awaken and go destroy the enemies. But here we're applying it to the first chatzi zayit. It was sleeping, it was dormant because it only had a half, so it didn't have anything to join with, and therefore it only joins with the chatzi zayit chustum komo only to make it pasul but not pigul. But when the second half zayit for zemano comes along, then the first half wakes up and regains its original strength and joins together and makes it pigul. So, according to Rava, it is in fact pigul. Rav Hamnuna disagrees, and he says no. And we have eruv machashavot, we have a mixture of different types of disqualification, because already here, chatzi zayit chutz lizmano, period. If you stop there, it's already pasul. The intention of chutz lizmano is a problem and is going to cancel out the chatzi zayit chutz lizmano, cancels out the pigul problem, and so it becomes pasul. And that's it. Once it becomes pasul, even though now you have yet another zayit, it does not reawaken the first chatzi zayit, according to Rav Hamnuna, and therefore Rav Hamnuna says it is not pigul, it's pasul, but no isur karet. Amar Rava, Mina Amina La Rava says, I have a proof from a Mishnah Masechet Teharot. Titnan, Kabesa Ochel Rishon, Vekabesa Ochel Sheni, Shebelalan Ze Baze Rishon, Chilekan Ze Sheni Veze Sheni. If one has a kabesa of food that is a Rishon Letum'ah, let's say it's dough, and if therefore this kabetza would touch something else, it would make that food sheni. Now you have that's a piece of dough A. You have another piece of dough B, and that is also the size of a kabesa. It has to be a kabesa in order to impart impurity to something else that it touches. The second one is a tameh tumat sheni, which means if it would touch something else like teruma, it would make it a shelishi. Fine. Now, these two pieces of dough, A and B, get mixed together into one. Well, what's going to be its status? It's going to be like a rishon. Anything it touches will be a sheni. Why? Because within this A plus B, within this, it's two kabesot big. Within it, there is a kabesa of rishon tumah. So even though it's all mixed together, but in there is a kabesa of rishon, and therefore the fact that there is more stuff in there is not going to help it and make it better. So it's going to, anything it touches, it will make a sheni. So the whole big thing is a rishon. Now what if then you mix it up, and then you split it into two kabesot again? Now you have A and B again. again, but you don't split it exactly as the mixture was before. You can't pick out the Rishon parts and the Sheni parts, and therefore this renewed half piece of dough that is a kabesa, call it now a prime, this itself is going to be a mixture of Rishon and Sheni, about half Rishon and half Sheni. But a half Rishon is not sufficient to make something else tameh as a Rishon and into a Sheni. So therefore, it's going to be the lowest common denominator, which is a Sheni. So once you split it, then each of the two halves will have the status only of a Sheni. That's what the Mishnah says. Now, here's what we can infer from this. Ha chazar ve'irban rishon haveh. What if you'd go and take them and put them back together again? Would it not be a rishon? Because now, even though you split it up, and when you split it up, it's Sheni and Sheni, but when you put it back together, it would make sense it would be Rishon again, because now you have a 2 kabesa ball of dough, and inside it is Rishon. Now, although in the middle it was Sheni, but that still is half of that. It's still the whole that piece, A prime, is considered a Sheni because it doesn't have a kabesa of Rishon in it. So we don't say, oh, now it's a Sheni forever, even though you put it back. But it would seem that once you put it back together, now that Rishon status will revive, and the whole big dough will be a Rishon. Mimai, and how do you know that that's true? Midikatani sefa, because the continuation of the Mishnah, in fact, teaches, Nafal ze ba'asmo v'ze ba'asmo kikar sheteruma pisaluha. If, right, again, we started off with kabesa rishon and kabesa sheni. You mixed it together and then you split it up. So if you take any one of those halves now and it falls on a piece of bread of teruma, this one falls by itself and then the other one also falls by itself, they will make it pasul. Pasul means it's a shelishi, because that's the end of the line for teruma. So therefore, we see when they are split up, they have only the status of sheni, which we know here already. But here is the chidush: naflu shenehem kachat asoa sheniya. If both of them fell at the same time together on this piece of teruma, then they make the teruma a sheniya. So you see clearly from here that if you take the two halves and put them back together, then it regains its rishon status, and that therefore will make the bread that it touches tameh tuma as a sheni. So this is a parallel case to the case above, where yes, you had chasi zayit and then chutz lizmano, and then chasi chutz l'mkomo, and then when you have chasi zayit, so even though at this point it's pasul, but when you have another second zayit of chutz lizmano, then it goes back, it rejoins, it reawakens, and it will be therefore a sur karet. That is Rava's proof. Rav Hamnuna says no. These cases are different. In the case of the dough, it's just food. I'm calling it dough. At the start, you have a kabesa rishon. So you have an amount of prohibition here that is prohibited as a rishon. It will make other things that it touches prohibited as tameh as a rishon. And then it was split up and then put back together. So there I could say, yes, since it was a status of rishon at first, then since it was split up, it became sheni. When it joins back together, okay, now the rishon can awaken. Yes, that's fine. But that's not the same as our case, because in our case, there never was a shiur to begin with, because at the beginning you just had chasi shiur chutz lizmano, so there was no pigul at the beginning. Then you had the mikomo, no pigul. So now you want to say that the second chutz lizmano is going to awaken something. It can't awaken something that was never there to begin with. It never had a isur pigul that you say, oh, it lost the status, then to regain it, it never had it in the first place, and therefore your case is not a parallel case. Rav Hamnuna says, I have a case that is more parallel, and there's a proof from my opinion. Ditnan, a Mishnah in Masechet Me'ilah. Ha'ochel shenitma be'ava tumah, v'shenitma bevlad hatumah. Here you have some food, and now we're talking about where the food, let's call it dough again, is less than a kabesa, so not sufficient to impart tumah. So you have one piece A, that became tameh from an av, meaning, so that is a rishon. If it touches something, it will make it a sheni. And you have another piece that's also less than a kabesa, and that became tameh as from a vlad hatuma, meaning that it is a sheni. So therefore we have one piece that's a rishon, and one piece that's a sheni. And each one is less than the kabesa. Mistarfin zeh im zeh letameh bekal shebishnehem. If they are mixed together, and together they have a kabesa, what status will it have? It'll be the lowest common denominator. In this case, they both together can impart as a sheni. It can't impart as a rishon because it's not a kabesa of rishon. But there is, within rishon is sheni. Sheni is less than that. So certainly a rishon can make something tameh as much as a sheni can. And so therefore the mixture together will have the status of the lower of them, which is a sheni. Ma'lav afagav dahadar malyeh. Now what happens if you take that mixture that's half rishon and half sheni, and then you go add more rishon tum'ah to it. From another source, you go add more food that is tameh rishon, so that you fill up the measure of a kabesa with just rishon. So, would it not be true that it would still remain a sheni even if you add more rishon to it, such that there is in the end a kabesa of rishon? Because look, the Mishnah doesn't say otherwise, so can't we assume that you can add more rishon and it will still stay a sheni, meaning that the rishon that was there before does not wake up. And this is more of a parallel case because it never had a status of being able to impart a rishon because it was not a kabesa. So at the start, it didn't have a sufficient amount to impart tumah as a rishon. Now it got mixed up, and now that rishon is going to be treated as a sheni together with the other things. So now it's a sheni. Now you want to add more. Well, there's nothing to wake up because it never had the requisite shiur to begin with, and therefore it's not going to wake up. Now it mixed into sheni. It'll remain sheni. That's a better proof, Rav Hamnuna says. But we reject this proof because Dilma Delaha Dar Maliyeh, who said that this Mishnah's law would be true even if you did fill it up. Maybe only if you didn't add more, then it's a sheni. Maybe if you did add more, it would in fact join together the rishon that was there before with the new rishon that you put in, and would have the status of the rishon. So this Mishnah does not say one way or another, and therefore it's not an absolute proof. כי אתה רב דימי אמר, חצי זית חוץ למקומו, וחצי זית חוץ לזמנו, וחצי זית חוץ לזמנו. Now, Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. He presented another case. It's another variation of the case that Rava said. We're going to have actually three new variations here, three different versions of what Taneh Bar Kapara says about it. Okay, so the first variation of the case is if someone's doing shechita, and at first he has in mind that he's going to eat hefa zayit chuslim komo. Okay, that by itself is not sufficient to do anything. And then he has intention to eat hefa zayit chusliz mano. At this point, the two hef zetim can join together to make it pasul. And then he has a third intention to eat a third half of a zayit chusliz mano. So similar to the first case that we had above, except that the order is different. Here it's mikomo, and then zmano and zmano. What's the answer? Taneh bar kapara. Bar kapara teaches pigul, and chasi zayit mo'il b'mkom kezayit. He thinks it is pigul, and these two zetim, the half zetim that he said, second and third, will join together, and we can ignore the first one because a half a zayit chuslim komo is not count when it's faced with a full zayit. If you had only half and half, meaning if you stopped after the second half zayit, then you say, okay, those will join together to make it pasul. But once you add the third one, then you have a full zayit, chutz lizmano. That is powerful, more powerful than the Chatzi Zayit Chutz Limkomo. So we can just ignore the Chatzi Chutz Limkomo entirely. Doesn't add or take away anything, and therefore it is pigul. You have a full Zayit Chutz Lizmano. Ki ata Ravin amar. When Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he gave a different variation. Chatzi Zayit Chutz Lizmano, veChatzi Zayit Chutz Lizmano, veChatzi Zayit Chutz Limkomo. Okay, same, just different order. Here he said half a Zayit outside the time. Well, that's so far nothing because only half a zayit. Another half a zayit outside the time. Oh, at this point, they join together. So it's actually an easier case because these two are back to back before there was any mikomo. So at this point already, it's pigul. And then afterwards, you have chutz lizmano. Okay, so here the chidush is, we're not going to take into account the third chatzi zayit to then go back and say, oh, see, there was an intention of pesul. So the same answer, teneba kapara pigul and chatzi zayit mo'id b'mkom kezayit. And the reason is because a half a zayit is not going to take effect when there's a full zayit. There's a full zayit of chutz lizmano. So the half zayit that comes afterwards, no less. So certainly that we can ignore. Rav Asher matneh hachi. Rav Asher has a different version of what Bar Kapara was teaching. Chatzi zayit chutz lizmano, vechazayit vechetzio chutz limkomo, vechetzio chutz lizmano. Taneh Kapara pigul and chatzi zayit mo'il b'mkom kazayit. Here the order is similar to the case that we started with, but there's one interesting extra variation. He starts off saying, I'm going to eat shechita, intention to eat a chatzi zayit outside of the time. Okay, so far nothing. And then he said, I'm going to eat another kezayit. He says a full kezayit. But half of that kezayit will be chutz limkomo, and half of it chutz lizmano. So here, because he makes basically a period, chatzi zayit chutz lizmano period, and then he opens a new sentence with kezayit, and that kezayit itself he's splitting into two. So because he's saying it about the second statement, the kezayit itself will be half of this and half that, I might have thought since he's putting these together that these chatzi chutz limkomo join together and make it pasul, and these join together strongly and make it pasul, and we would then ignore the first chatzi zayit chutz lizmano. You might have thought that. So therefore, the chidush here is that no, same law. This is pigul because we ignore the fact that he said the second one as a full zayit, that is half and half. Doesn't matter. We take all the three halves together and we say, well, the half zayit chutz lizmano adds together with the other half zayit chutz lizmano. Those join together to make a full zayit chutz lizmano, and therefore we ignore the half zayit that is chutz limkomo, and that case is also pigul. So certainly that would agree with Rava law that we started with. Amar Rabbi Yanai, Chisheb sheyochelu kelabim lemachar pigul dichtib, ve'et Izebel yochelu hakelabim bechelek Yisrael. Rabbi Yanai said, if someone is doing shechita, whatever any of the services, and he has in mind that dogs will eat it tomorrow. Now, that's the question. If he said, I'm going to eat it tomorrow, or a human will eat it tomorrow, that makes it pigul. But is a dog eating it considered eating? So he says, yes, it is pigul. How do you know that a dog eating something is considered a halachic act of eating? Because we see in the Navi predicts that Izebel is going to die, and it's going to be a disgraceful death. And the dogs are going to Izebel yochelu. The dogs will eat her body, lick her blood in the land of Yisrael. So you see that it talks about yochelu hakelabim. The verb yochelu can apply to dogs eating, and therefore, even if he has in mind that dogs are eating, that's included in an act of consumption. Doesn't have to be a human being. מתקיף לה רבי עמה, אלא מעתה חישב שתאכלהו אש למחר, דכתיב תאכלהו אש לא נופח. הכי נמה דפיגול. Rabbi Ameh challenges this. He says, what if he, while doing shechita, has intention that fire will consume it? Now, because fire, we also use the verb le'echol to talk about a consuming fire, even though it doesn't eat like an animal or human does. As a pasuk says in Iyov, a fire not blown shall consume him. The context talking about an evildoer, a fire not blown. There's going to be an eternal fire that's going to punish him. Anyway, it does say that esh, and it says the verb of eating. So since it says that verb, maybe also if he has in mind a kazait of it, I will burn tomorrow, and then also will it become pigul. And if you say that yes, indeed so, v'atinan le'echol kachasi zait ulaktir chasi zait kasher she'en achila v'aktara mistarfin. But that would go against our Mishnah, because our Mishnah taught that if he has in mind to eat half a zait and to burn on the mizbeach half a zait, then the korban is kasher, because eating and burning on the mizbeach, haktara, do not join together. Those are two separate things. And so, therefore, it should not be. When he says a fire is going to eat it, that should be the same as lehaktir. So this would be the wrong conclusion. So just because it says the verb tochelu regarding fire, you don't say that joins together. So too, just because it says the verb yochelu regarding a dog doesn't necessarily mean that it should join together. And so the answer is ida peka b'shon achila hachiname hacha b'maiskinan da peka b'shon aktara d'shon achila lechud u'shon aktara lechud. And the answer is it depends on what verb he uses. If he says tomorrow I'm going to eat half a kezait myself and burn half a kezait, and he uses the verb achila. It says a fire I will consume half and a fire will consume half, and uses the word achila for both. Then, in fact, they do join together. So as long as using the same verb, yes, you can join together a human and an animal eating it, consuming it, or an animal and or a human and a fire consuming it. Indeed. But this Mishnah, our Mishnah, when it says lehaktir, that's when he used a different verb, lehaktir, which specifically means burning it on the mizbeach. In that case, when he says, I'm going to eat half a kezait and I'm going to lehaktir half a kezait, since he used different verbs and those are different actions, therefore those they will not join together. That's what the Mishnah was talking about when it said that in that case it's kasher. בערב אשר חישב לאכול כזית בשני בני אדם מהו? בתר מחשבה אז לינן דאיקה שיעורה או בתר אוכלין אז לינן ולקה שיעורה? Rav Asher asked, what if one does shechita having in mind that two people are going to together eat a kezait? Each one will eat half a kezait outside of the right time. What do we say about that? Do we follow the thought? And the thought is that it will be eaten outside the time, and it doesn't matter who's going to eat it, and therefore there is a kezait altogether. Or do we follow the people? There are a number of eaters, and each eater is eating less than a kezait, and therefore it will not be pigul. Amar Abaye tashema le'echol kachasi zait ulaktir kachasi zait kasher shen achilav haktara mistarfin. Abaye says, I can learn from the end of the Mishnah that says one does shechita having in mind that he will eat half a kezait, and he's going to burn on the mizbeach half a kezait. Those don't join together. The korban is totally kosher because eating and burning on the mizbeach do not join together. So there's only a half a zait each. We can infer from this that it's when it's two different things, actions like eating and burning, that's when they don't join together. But if it would be eating and eating in a similar way, in other words, all other circumstances are the same, except that instead of eating and haktara, it's eating and eating. So what would be in a case that's equivalent to this in all other ways, except that it's achila instead of haktara? Well, that would be two different people eating it. It's similar because in the case in the Mishnah, it's a person eating half a kezait and the mizbeach consuming half a kezait. Those do not join together because haktara is different from achila. But if it would be achila and achila, even if it's two different consumers, they would join together. That we can infer that from the Mishnah. So Hashma Mina, we have an answer that yes, they join together. Rava, another question. Rava says, what if someone's doing shechita with intention to eat a kezait outside of the time, but his intention is to eat it over a long period of time, more than achilat peras? Generally for halacha, in order for something to be considered an act of eating, it has to be a kezait within the amount of time it would take to eat half a loaf. So like for Pesach, matzah on Pesach, you have to eat a kezait, but it has to be within 9 minutes or so. Or for Kippur, one violates Kippur and would get karet only if he eats a kezait within that amount of time. So what about this? He has in mind he's going to eat a kezait of this korban outside the time, but he's going to take a long time. He's going to take over an hour. L'achilat gava medaminan le or l'achilat hejot medaminan le. Do we compare this to the consuming of on high, meaning the mizbeach? The mizbeach has no time limit. When you have to burn certain parts of the animal on the mizbeach, it doesn't have to burn them up within 10 minutes. You put them on. You could put them on during the day. They could burn all day and all night, as long as sometime they get burnt. Then one fulfills. So there's no time limit. There's no achilat peras for gavoa. So do we say it's that? And since there's no time limit, therefore one is chayav pigul? Or do we say we're going to compare this to the eating of a person, where it has to be within a certain amount of time, and since he has this in mind for a long period of time, that's not called eating, and it's not pigul. Amar Abaye Tashema, Abaye says, I have an answer. Lechol kazayit kachasi zayit, ulaktir kachasi zayit kasher, shenachilav aktara mistarfin. It's going to be a similar answer to what we just said from the end of the Mishnah. If someone has in mind to eat half a zayit and to burn on the mizbeach half a zayit, then the korban is kosher because we don't join achila and haktara. Tama de lechol aktir halechol v'lechol mistaref. Oh, so it doesn't join only because it's achila and haktara, two different actions totally. But if it was two eating actions, it would join together. But so it has two eating actions that otherwise are the same in other respects to that case. V'haktara biyoter mikidei achilat peras. Who? Now, in the case of the Mishnah, where it says haktara, that haktara would be for a long period of time. It doesn't have to be within the amount of time to eat half a loaf. And therefore, we can answer that here also, when he has in mind to eat a half a kezait, but over a long time, so that's still called eating. And therefore, it would be pigul because, all right, just like haktara, it's the only reason one is kosher in the Mishnah is because it was haktara and achila. But if it was achila, like haktara, then it would be liable. So isn't that a good proof? We say not necessarily. Dilma besek gadol. Even haktara, maybe you do need, in this case, for the haktara to be within a limited time, and you could have that with a big fire, a very big hot fire that would burn up the piece within kedeh achilat peras. And so maybe that's the case that the Mishnah was talking about. That would be equivalent, the achila equivalent to achila and haktara. So therefore, there is no proof from this case. Now we're going to analyze that part that we just quoted, the last part of the Mishnah, that if he has in mind to, while doing shechita, to eat half a kezait and to burn half a kezait, those do not join together, so the korban is kosher. Okay, why is it kosher in this case? Because he was going to eat part of it and burn part of it. Eat part of it that would be eaten and burn part of it that would be burnt. Therefore, we can infer that if it was two eatings, even though eating half of something that normally people eat, and the other half is eating something that is not normally eating something that is put on the mizbeach, it would join together. So we can infer from this part that if I said I'm going to eat half a kezait of an edible part of the korban and eat half a kezait of the chaleb part that goes on the mizbeach, then that would join together. And it would be pigul. Katani resha leechol et shedarko leechol mistaref et shedarko leechol in et she'en darko la. But that will contradict the beginning of the Mishnah that said, if I have in mind while I'm doing shechita to eat something that is normally eaten, only if I'm eating something that is normally eaten outside the time, that would be pigul. Or if I intend to burn something that is normally burnt, that would be pigul. But you can't cross categories. And if I cross categories, then it would not be. So that's a contradiction to what we just said. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Hamaneh Rabbi Eliezer he. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, the author of this Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer de Amar. Of this part of the Mishnah, the last part of the Mishnah, is Rabbi Eliezer who said, Amar, Mechashivin mechilat adam, lachilat mizbech, melat mizbech, lachilat adam. Didnan, Hashoret et hazebach, lechol davar she'en darko lechol, laktir davar she'en darko laktir, kasher, Rabbi Eliezer poter. Rabbi Eliezer says you can't mix and match categories, and we count something that is generally supposed to be eaten, we count that together with something that is burned on the Mizbeach, and vice versa. Something that's burned on the Mizbeach, we'll count it with something that is normally eaten, as it says in the Mishnah. Someone who's doing a shechita korban, and he has in mind to eat something that usually is burnt on the Mizbeach, or he has in mind to burn on the Mizbeach something that is supposed to be eaten. So, according to Tanakama, kasher, because he says that we don't mix categories. But Rabbi Eliezer says that's pasul. And so, therefore, the inference that we made from the end of the Mishnah can be according to Rabbi Eliezer. Abaye Amar, afilu tema Rabbanan, vela tema ha le'echol vele'echol davar she'en darko le'echol, ela ema ha le'echol vele'echol davar she'darko le'echol. Abaye says you can even interpret that last clause of the Mishnah according to Rabbanan, that you have to stay within the same category, and do not make the inference that you did. Rather, say like this: Velatema, do not say the inference that you did. That since Chatzi zayit lechol and Chatzi zayit lehaktir do not join together, therefore eating and eating something that is eaten, and intention to eat hefek zayit of something that is not generally eaten does join together. Do not say that inference that as you did, but rather make the following inference. Therefore, something that is eaten together with something that is eaten also does join together. In other words, two hefezait of this, of a part that's generally eaten, and another hefezait of that's generally eaten, and have in mind both of them to do it outside of the time, then that joins together. That's what the inference is going to be. Now we ask about that. My kamash malan. Why would we need to know? Why would we need to be taught that? Isn't that obvious from the resha that two halves of something that is within the same category joined together? If it's something that is generally eaten, then I could figure out from the beginning of the Mishnah that says pigul. It said if it's half a zayit outside and half a zayit tomorrow, then it's pasul, meaning because they join together to make pasul. And if it was two kezayits tomorrow, then it would be pigul. So we know that two of the same type definitely join together, two things that can be eaten. And if it's teaching us that one does not join together something that is eaten and something that is burnt, actually I don't even need the sefa to teach that, because I can infer that from the resha. Only if you are eating something that is generally eaten, so then that will join together with something else that is generally eaten. But if you are going to join together something that is something that's eaten together with something that is burnt, then they will not join together. So I also know that principle from the resha. So what do I need the sefa for? Hashta ma le'echol davar she'en darko le'echol lamistaref le'echol ulaktir mi ba'ele. If I know from the resha that eating something that is eaten and together with half a zayit, and then another half a zayit of something that is generally not eaten, and those two don't join together, then all the more so if I have half a kazayit I'm going to eat and half a kazayit that I'm going to actually burn. I have in mind to burn. Do I even need to say that? So all the more so I can learn from the resha that just like if I try to join together eating something that is eaten and eating something that is not eaten, they don't join together. All the more so if I try to join together eating something that's eaten and burning something that's burnt, that's more different. Lechol ulaktir is terich. And so we answer, actually we do need the end of the Mishnah, in order, in fact, to teach us that basic law, this fundamental law, that having a hefek kazayit for eating and then intending another hefek kazayit to burn, doesn't join together. I need to say that because sakada techamina hatam hu delav ki orche ka mechashev aval hachad bahai ki orche emadisterif kamashmalan. I might have thought in the resha there it's something that is not the normal way to have it. That's what he's thinking about, and that's why it doesn't join together, because he's considering eating half a kazayit of something that's eaten plus hefek zayit of something that's not eaten. So he's trying to eat something that's supposed to be on the mizbeach. That's a mismatch of category, and maybe that's why in that case it does not join together. But here, where he's having in mind to do with that piece of meat that which is normally done with each of the pieces of meat, by saying I'm gonna have hefek zayit, I'm gonna eat something edible, and I'm going to burn hefek zayit of something that is burnable on the mizbeach. So I might actually think that would join together. That's why I need the sefa in order to teach me this basic law, and I cannot infer anything else from it, and therefore I don't have to infer that the sefa is like Rabbi Eliezer. I can say that the sefa will agree with Rabbanan. Hadran alach kol zevaḥim shekibelu daman.